So this video is on theism versus atheism and the general view of how a theist comes to faith. And essentially, I would hold that it is essentially a transcendental uh, belief of natural law that God exists and not necessarily supernatural, but can be composed of the supernatural if we tie in paradoxes uh, for supernatural coexistence of transcendence, being omnipresent, omniscience, and omnipotent. But and those elements being composed philosophically. But the first address is that one can come to the faith through belief in eternal existence, and one of those basic scientific facts that can lead a person to faith is Einstein's theory of relativity, which is that matter cannot be created nor destroyed, and eternally existing energy is equivalent to mass conversion. Therefore, there is a physical eternal existence, and therefore being able to philosophically compose a mental eternal existence from Aristotle's unmoved mover into an endless cycle, which is an Ouroboros, meaning an eternal mind from which an unmoved mover can move into endless cycle from Malebranche's occasionalism, which it can concede or continue as an eternal mind to an endless cyclic view, separating the two Abrahamic faiths of Judaism and Islam, but the eternal mind of endless cycle being the Ouroboros, that we can exist forever, and therefore transcendental of being God, and of course the transcendent view of God being all actions of cause and effect, whether they have a beginning and end or endless cycle of existence, to the transcendence of eternity of the eternal mind. This being said, God holding to these views is essentially that the problem with atheist views is that they center on logical positivism, which is that entities must have verification and falsification for relevancy or for proof. There's a problem with this in critique of reason and all of humanities, that essentially proofs that exist without verification or falsification, such as examples are economics, politics and government, court justices, and various differences in it, philosophy, sociology, art, psychology, and ethics. So while all these humanities in existence and currency being economics, there's certainly proof of their existence. Nobody can say that the dollar bill is not proof of currency, although it has no verification or falsification in the various instances of opinion of economic theory. But there are certainly, fiat currencies holding to the value, even if we don't have that and they're just simply digits on a computer screen. Just like God and having in the currency in God we trust. Court justice in the various instances is, and having courts to administer it, having no verification or falsification, but having proof of existence as the consecration of courtrooms, and of course people swearing upon the Holy Bible to administer witness testimony to a court case. Politicians, of course, swearing to the Judeo-Christian faith, and of course having various views of different political sanctities, from Republican to Democrat and Libertarian. So all these things of humanities in view, and then of course art, that being said at the Renaissance, and the various Michelangelos, The Last Judgment, and The Last Supper, and of course these having varied viewpoints of their humanities in critiqued reason, and of course having God alongside these viewpoints, and of course psychology and sociology, which this is probably where we might abandon God, but we have Freud and Carl Jung, who, interesting enough, have some sort of godly connection to these elements of psychology, although it is not necessarily entwined, or certainly a necessity, being a very secular view of our reality, being psychology and of course sociology. But having, even as a studied field, no verification or falsification, but studied numbers, such as what Mark Twain would disagree with, was statistics and rational thought, to which can be critiqued reason, being that onset of cognitive resonance of intuition. So while rational thought is not usually considered critiqued reason of cognitive resonance, it's usually considered like puzzle pieces that have no way of being verified, such as, I dreamed Susan would die, and 2 days later she's dead, and so I rationalize it must have been because of my dream. Rationalism having no clear connection to reasoned critique, which is empiricism, is a prerequisite requirement of rational intuitive thought. So that being said, these instances of God, correlate theism and atheism, being holtological positivism, can no longer make sense in humanity's struggle, because we exist with all these various instances of humanities: court justice, politics, government, economics, sociology, psychology, art, and ethics. Humanity being composed of all these things, otherwise we would run rampant chaos. So it doesn't make sense to hold to a logical positivist view or some pure logic, because humanity is not possible to live in that type of existence where we are only logical beings stretched forth on pure science. That is not possible, that we can exist in that realm. But that being said, here's another thing about theism, is that the same philosophical roots that are in the Holy Bible, being the poetic writings inspired by God, are the same notions you can get from Nietzsche, those being poetic instances to suggest the philosopher that we all know as the supposed antichrist or supposed nihilism of atheism. That being, he's a philosopher using poetry. So I don't see any difference in the Bible in that being obviously metaphorical, poetical writings inspired by God, therefore to write about this being a work of philosophy in introducing God to our existence. Because Nietzsche is thought of no different he is writing about the legacy of the last man standing of society, the perfect being, and being built of mediocrity, and that being the Ubermensch, and subsequent variances of nihilism crippled in Zoroastric society. One being abomination of desolation and gay science, thereby showing the great abomination that is left desolate into Exodus's desert without the promised land. But you have these instances where comparable, the Bible is not laughably some ridiculous work of fiction. It is divinely, poetically inspired philosophical work of the inspiration of God. So I think it is a marvelous work of poetry, and not something foolishly written, as some people would have you believe. And that being said, those philosophical elements being comparable to Nietzsche. So this is the backing of God that I hold as a theist, and some of the atheist arguments that are mentioned. And of course, if someone has another view that I'm building up a straw man for atheism, you can go ahead and leave comments. I'm very willing to have an open dialogue. But this is my first YouTube video. I'm planning on having a few more. This is the basis of my faith in God and the backing of the Holy Bible, which, as a philosophical work, was composed by philosophical theists at the Council of Nicaea. So this is not just, this is about 300 to 400 years, and a lot longer than that if you can't count the Greek Septuagint and the Latin Vulgate, of verifiable critiqued reason for doctrine of being of God, from philosophers, which is basically the study before someone gets to theism, and then as being the study of religion, the study of God, the study of the mind. So people have been verifying this as authentic work for the existence of God for a long time. So it's not foolish scribblings. The Holy Bible is something to verify God's existence. Obviously, these very intelligent people who have devoted their life to studying the existence of God have deemed this very, very, very intelligent work of poetry, marvelously written, to be canon as of Council of Nicaea, and pre-existing to their Latin and Greek counterparts, the Latin Vulgate and the Greek Septuagint. So, in instance, New King James Version, written from, copied from German, from the Gutenberg, obviously has a lot of verified substance of inspired holy written word. So it is not something contaminated or easily written off as foolish. But I find a lot of the commentary of other people writing about, obviously, what some might see as contradictions, but obviously aren't. They are paradoxes of some sort. But in any event, they don't deter my faith in God. But I like anybody else, can find them funny. There's a lot of written verses in here that can draw humor. But anyway, this is my detailedness of my theistic faith. And of course, I don't see anything wrong with laughing with God. Certainly, Isaac did. Um, I think theists who can more admit to scriptural icons that give humor from what might seem to be error or gullibility is certainly funny.